Hey everybody, it is 5:30. We usually do this at 11 in the morning, but we have a very special guest today, and I'm excited. On today's show, Ryan Gill, and wow, this guy has more jobs than anyone I know. He's the CEO of Communo, chairman of The Gathering, co-founder of Cult Collective. There's probably 10 things I'm missing, but Ryan, thank you for doing this. Tell people, you tell people who you are.
No, that's nice. I definitely do have too much. My business coaches and people around me have been letting me know, so I probably need to whittle that down. But what can I say? I like to stay busy. I'm also a dad and a husband, first and foremost. But yeah, my day job though, those sound impressive. Those are big titles, but on the day to day, I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Communo, and I've learned, Saul, which you've probably learned over the years, 21 years of running businesses, that, it's cliche, but the CEO should be really serving the business. And it's not, I work for the team. They don't work for me. And it's taken me a long time to figure that out, but that's my day job. Really proud of the company I founded called Collective. It's the entrepreneur's dream to have a company that you build up that doesn't need you anymore. And you can let other people run it. So that's doing very well. And then The Gathering is my pride and joy. Happens every year in Banff, Alberta, Canada. For those that are watching from around the world, it's a magical place. Have you been to Banff? I'm sure, Saul.
I've been. It's quite nice there.
Yeah, and so that's a global marketing event that honors the most cult-like and most courageous brand leaders in the world. And we're in our 8th year, which is crazy to think about. But my day job is Communo, and it's what I'm extremely passionate about right now.
All right, so I have a couple goals for our conversation. One, to learn a bunch of stuff, but also I want to get invited to The Gathering if we
You're
ever
invited.
if we ever do live events again. So you've done all this cool stuff. Where did it all start? What's kind of your origin story?
Yeah, I especially Communo, it's interesting. People have been asking me the purpose of it, and I don't want to get too deep right away, but why not? For those that are watching, I spent, when I was 6 months old till about 6 years old, in the hospital. I had something called Hirschsprung's disease, and little did you know your purpose would be being lived out, 30, 35 years or 40 years later. But I experienced extreme loneliness during those years in the hospital. And through my life, I've always been a community builder and wanted to be around people, not just because I'm a people person or I can't stand to be alone, but I didn't want anyone to feel what I felt in those years of just being lonely. And I think it's one of the worst feelings in the world. And for some people, you just want to be around a few people, which is great, but to be alone is no good. And so Communo, at its core, one of our things is better together. And in the marketing and advertising field, it's a fairly egotistical world, which I think is a veil of insecurity. And a lot of people just feel alone, and there's this like scarcity mindset. And so Communo is all about building a true community. I've been building communities my whole life, but now I'm doing it at scale globally with Communo. And man, it's been quite a ride. The hardest thing I've ever done in all my entrepreneurial endeavors, for sure, building a marketplace or a platform, but most rewarding because I get to live my purpose. And so you asked how I got into business, though. So I think my first business was when I was 11 years old. I started selling golf balls. It's the ultimate business. I should probably get back into it because my brothers work for free, so there's no cost of labor. I somehow talked them into it. And then the product was free, too. Sometimes we even snuck onto the golf course and took live balls. Don't tell anyone. But that was my first business, and it was awesome to see. I came from a lower income family, and we weren't like broke or poor or anything, but we didn't have much. So it was nice to be able to contribute to the family. Money doesn't make you happy. Not making money doesn't, or having money isn't bad either. So I realized early on I'd like to make money and be able to not just take care of myself, but help others out. And so did that for a while. Was really bad in school. Loved the social part. I probably got an A+ in the social part, but it just wasn't. School wasn't for me. Got kicked out, I think, in grade 11. Somehow snuck into the fooled my parents that I graduated and got into the grad somehow. I don't know how the story goes, and then I just realized I didn't have a chance to get into universities because, are you from Ontario, right?
Yeah.
Remember you had to have OAC, like grade 3. I don't know if they have it still. So I was like a long way from that. So I couldn't even get into any colleges or anything. And my uncle had a new startup university college out west, and it's all who you know. So he got me in, and came out west, went to the school for a bit, didn't do well again, but met a guy at the school that was in the class with me that was starting an ad agency, and ended up going to work for him for about a couple of years. And then the rest is history. Then I got the entrepreneurial bug, started a firm called Suitcase Interactive, which had tremendous success in the early 2000s into late 2010, 11, sold that business, went through multiple ups and downs with that, almost lost the business. We were close to $1 million in debt. It was a tough lessons. Thank God for them though. And then now went on to start after that Cult Collective, and then the Gathering and a few other businesses, but find myself today with Communo.
That's cool. So I want to go back to this not being good at school thing, because I'm always fascinated by people who seem to struggle but do extremely well in the business world. So do you and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, because you're obviously very intelligent, you figured stuff out. Do you think you just couldn't, you just didn't like school, or you were bored by it? Like there's an interesting piece, because I've heard that many times from people, and they go on to be quite successful. You'd imagine if you didn't excel in school, you'd struggle everywhere, but you didn't seem to struggle.
Yeah, I think I have trouble following the rules. Usually entrepreneurs aren't rule followers. My youngest daughter, or my oldest daughter, Scarlett, is a very compliant girl, and she's killing it at school. And my younger daughter, Hallie, is the opposite, and you can see it at a young age. And I think school, it's obviously a great thing. It's changed our nations and countries, and education's super important, but it hasn't evolved, and it's a one size fits all. And I think we see, I don't know what you see out in the market, but I love places like Lamba School and other schools that are evolving, that help kids and people find their passion early, because I think everyone's good at something. I'm not an intellectual, but my wife and I have a joke. So for those watching, I don't actually mean this, well, maybe I do. But I said she's really smart, but I'm a genius. But what I mean by that is I will not stop until I figure something out. And so it's actually not a genius. I literally have a problem. And if someone can help me out, let me know. Is I just can't stop until I figure it out. And so I've been like that my whole life, but I just wasn't turned on by school and trying to get calculus figured out. I just knew that wasn't going to be me. And so when I found advertising, I found my home. I love creativity. I love solving problems, and even in that role, even in that business, you're not going to work harder than me. And I think people ask about my success. There's always another gear to find. And so that's where I found my home. And then now it's 21 years later, I'm still in the same industry.
That's very cool. So, you've mentioned the Gathering, you've mentioned Cult, and you've mentioned Communo. I'd love to kind of go through all three of them, but let's start, I guess, chronologically. What is Cult? So people understand.
Cult, at the very simple, is a consultancy business. It's through the lens of marketing, but for those out there that know, like maybe Boston Consulting Group or Profit or Bain, we run into them a lot, but we are more street version of that. They're in the suits and ties, and we don't. Not that suits and ties matter, but it's not our style. And a lot of people that work for us are either entrepreneurs themselves or just see things through a different lens. And the number one lens we look through is cult. We're called cult brands. Cult brands often do not advertise. They don't advertise as much anyways as their mediocre peers. They spend those advertising dollars on customer happiness and engagement. They don't spend all their money getting new customers. They spend their money keeping the customers they have and getting those customers to tell others about them. The greatest a brand we've worked with that I learned all this from early on with Colt was Harley Davidson, the most tattooed brand in the world. You know you have a Colt brand when people tattoo it on their body or on their face or on their body, And so I started to study that, and I wrote a book called Fix with my co-founder, Chris Nealand, and another author named Rob Howard. He's actually in Ontario, in Kingston. Shout out Kingston. And we wrote the book around Fix, and on the cover of it is a guy with a heroin needle. And that's kind of like what advertising is. It's a tax unremarkable companies pay for being unremarkable, because you can't spend enough advertising ever. And if you do, you get such a hit on the sales, which it works, but then you got to hit it again to make it happen again. And it's a very bad, it's not a virtuous cycle. It's a negative cycle. And you're either just yelling really loud or highly discounting. And so Colt is a consulting firm that goes in and he does two things. We either help Colt brands stay Colt-like, which is arguably harder. And so we work with people like the Home Depot or Zappos, the Los Angeles Lakers. We work with, I talked about Harley Davidson, and then there's smaller cult brands like Big Rock Brewery out west here. And these are brands that just operate differently. And then we work with brands that aspire to be cult-like, that don't want to spend enormous, wasteful money on advertising because it doesn't work. It doesn't deliver long-term results, and it's unsustainable. That's cult.
That's fascinating. So I've been a part of a couple smaller size cult brands, helped build cult brands. So I totally agree with you. I like advertising too, but I think that advertising is, you do want to sort of give that artificial bump and then sort of wean people off and do some great things. So that's very cool. So, Communo, we can talk about the gathering in a minute, but Communo, explain to people what it is, and how did it come to be, and how does it work?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's a platform business, a marketplace, and how it came to being is probably the best way to explain it. My co-founder and I, Chris, when we came together, I had a fairly good sized firm, and he did too. When we came together, we said we're not great managers. We just want to have the core people, and then this is before starting Colt, and then have a bunch of contractors on speed dial. And when we created Colt, we wanted to go from 60 or 70 people down to like 30, but keep our top line at the same number or higher and get our profit numbers up. And so that was our dream. We did it for a while, and it kind of worked. And I really loved when we turned the corner about 3 years ago, when Chris said, listen, Colt's doing fine. Why don't you go build that, press a button and we can scale our company to 100 people a day in one day, and then back down to 20 or 30 if we needed to. And we had clients like Home Depot that would pay us $500,000 in 1 month, Saul, and you probably have been through this. But then the next month they pay us $5,000, and the next month maybe 20, and the next month 500. How do you staff that? You don't. And I come from the old school, for anyone watching there that used to have agency of record or longer term projects. They're not going away, they're gone. It's just those days are over. So the day of the contingent worker is here. So rather than being waiting for that to happen to us, we went out and built it. And Chris said to me one day, he said, why don't you go build that magic button that you can press to scale our teams up and down? And I did that about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 now, started Communo. And it's been an amazing ride, a rocky ride. We're far from done, but we're building what I call an open advertising platform. So it started out it was a private network for ad agencies. There's 72 different kinds of them around the world, PR firms, digital firms, brand consultancies, you name it, and freelancers in the industry that are, another 72 type disciplines. And they had to be vetted and verified, so they are who they say they are. Listen, I have friends, before I say this, I want to qualify, I have friends in executive positions at Fiverr and Upwork, and I love those people. I hate their business because it's a race to the bottom. And they can say whatever they want, but I know it's not helping anyone to have a $5 logo or a $50 audio clip. Like, that's just taking advantage of creatives. And so the average deal on our platform is $63,000. It's amazing. That's a career. That's a project. That's like, you can build on that. And so we've been going for 2.5 years. Today I looked, I think the GMV, which is the gross market value, liquidity of deals on our platform, is over $260 million, which is amazing. And there's projects from all around the world, but we're mainly in North America right now. And it's a marketplace to give and get work and find talent. And as of July 1st, tomorrow, we will be allowing brands to come on the platform. We're allowing 150 beta brands, only ones that believe in platforms. And then we'll be in September, we'll be adding students in schools and then media. And so really verticalizing. If you think of people said this about us, we haven't said it about ourselves, but I liked it. They said, if Tinder and LinkedIn were to have a baby, it would be Communo. We're a matchmaker.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. So I've always sort of employed this formula. So it's I didn't invent it. They've been doing it in Hollywood forever, but you've got a pool of amazing people, and maybe you want to work with those same people over and over and over. But for every project, I build a dream team out of my pool of 19 people that I work with over and over and over. For a project, I may only need 4 people with certain skill sets. I bring them in, and it may be a different 4 people or a different 5 people for the next project and stuff like that. So I fully appreciate and understand the idea of pulling these teams together and doing stuff like that. I've always been, people are always surprised that this is how I work. And I've explained exactly what you've talked about, the advertising model, where you lose a client and you just gut your whole team, and they either go to the next agency that picked up that project, or they're sort of cast out into the wind. But right now there's something completely different going on with of course the pandemic and all the furloughs and layoffs and downsizing of all these agencies. There's never been more impressive talent available in the market right now than in any time that I can think of. One, that's a great thing, for these people who want to become freelancers. It's a great thing for Communo because you guys can tap into that market. But how do brands sort of, you said brands are coming on the platform. How do brands react to that? And how do agencies sort of react to that? Are they embracing the model, or they just, they fighting you the way you fight Fiverr? Are they fighting Communo by saying, well, we'll just hire them all back when we can?
Yeah, of course. I think Communo's COVID has hastened what I thought would take 3 or 4 years to catch mainstream. We probably moved ahead 2 or more. But listen, I'm fighting it. Like I'm one of the founder. I understand it's new. So there's this awesome quote. Like even I forget who said it, but even changes for the better are often met with they're uncomfortable or unwanted. And so Communo clearly is the future. And we're not here to replace agencies, or it's just a newer, faster way to work. And there's always early adopters, Saul. You get this. I've followed your career. I checked you out and reached out, and I think you probably teach me more about this than I know. But even people on our board, and it's their job to warn us, to say, hey, when you let brands on, you're either going to piss off one side or the other. And I just disagree. Because we're moving into this age of abundance. And I don't know how much you know about the advertising marketing world, but there's 4 or 5 holding companies. Even that word holding in the age of sharing will be their demise. Like, it's just changing. Caged up marketers and creatives aren't meant to work 9 to 5. Do I think the office is gone? No. Do I think office centricity is over? Yes. That's bad for me. I own commercial real estate. Or is it bad? Do we need to innovate? And so, with Communo being at the center of this movement, and we're the biggest in Canada and growing fast in the US, clearly we're past the early adopter stage now, and there's hundreds of agencies and tens of thousands of freelancers that have joined. But it's going to take time. I think people need to learn to trust people. Like we've learned to. It wasn't that long ago when it was like, I only shop at the store. And it's like, I don't go to the store anymore. Amazon Prime is my life. It's the only one. And going to the store is weird. I think having full-time employees, I don't want to be called a heretic, but I'm cool with it too if I am. But it's I think coming out of COVID, when we get back to normal, whenever that is, a good agency that's living by an open talent model, that's what I call it. We call it the open advertising platform. Probably has a good agency. It's like a small percentage of them have 10% of their people outsourced consistently, 10 to 15, but they have this attitude, if I'm successful, I'm big. I think coming out of COVID, most agencies are going to have like 40% of contingent or gig workers, freelancers, or 50 to 60%. I think the blurring of the lines is going to be insane because, you know, the most talented people to produce the best work probably don't live in your city or in your four walls. That's okay. But now with platforms like Communo, you can hire people from all over the world. One of our customers also said they've had people on their platform now. They have this little clock. It's like a grid that they say, we work 24/7. They have people when one shift's done, they have people working on their stuff 24/7. How amazing is that?
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from one of the viewers, Mike Payne. Do brands naturally see Communo as an advantage when they work with an agency, or have they found it to be a tough sell? And how can agencies best communicate the power of the platform?
Yeah, so I can only speak. Good question. I can only speak from my experience, and I remember when we first were really completely transparent, Saul, about Communo powering Colt. So we started Colt, but Colt was the first customer, right? We were we ate our own dog food, as they say. And so I remember standing, we were up against some big agencies, really big ones for the Keurig account in Boston. And so we were there, and I knew our creative chops were as good, but maybe they were a little better. So I was saying to myself, how do I just stand out? Like it's our last chance with the CMO. And I said, I just pulled open the app, and the app was shitty at the time. Hopefully I can swear. It was not great. And I said, you know, I know the other agencies, we're only a 30, 40 person shop, 30, 35, I think we were at the time. And I know we're up against other ones, but at the time I said, I have 10,000 people right here in this phone that I can press a button on. And we have access to all of them. And he said, let me see that. And he grabbed the phone. He's like, what? You have VR people? And I said, yeah, and I have access to them, and they're vetted. And we ended up getting that contract, and he cited the reason because we were upfront that we were going to use consultants and contractors, and we were able to give them what they needed, and even if we didn't have them in-house. So that transparency worked. However, Mike, the question is, it can be a tough sell because it's still early, but it's using an open platform. I think the most enlightened leaders appreciate that, to say, of course, you're not going to have everyone in-house, especially if you're working with, like Saul, I know you work with big brands around the world, especially when you're working with brands that have multinational presence. You can't have that. And so you have to be platform enabled. Those agencies and those brands that are not, obviously I'm bullish on it, they're just not going to make it. They're not going to be competitive. And it's just so reminiscent. So I don't know how long you've been at this, but I remember 99, 2000 selling websites and literally getting laughed at. Like, no one's going to buy anything or check this out online. And I have a great story. Can I tell you a quick one?
Yeah, of course.
I think the listeners will love this. I was cold calling out of magazines trying to get clients early 2004. And one of my board members at the time gave me this magazine, The Rob Report. Do you remember that? It was like Rich Guy magazine, which I wasn't. So I was just going through, if people that advertise in this magazine, they must have money. And so lots of yacht companies were in there. I literally got denied by everybody. It's the classic story. The last one I called was a company called Burger Boat Company. Shout out to a girl named Katie Ross. She's still a friend of mine. It's a long time ago. But they had a bad website. When you went there, it had like seagulls and just bad representation, as though for like squawking. They're selling their yachts are like $100 million. So the story goes, we got there, we went, the biggest website we'd ever done at that time was maybe $3,000. And this is in Wisconsin, a place called Manitowoc, which is, if you watch Making a Murderer, that's where the show Making a Murderer happened. But they have a big shipyard there. We went there, we walked around, toured these boats. It was amazing. And so we presented to them these different prices of their website, what they could do. And so we really pushed the envelope, and the bottom price was 10 grand. The middle price was 30, which we would have been like 30 grand. And then we just threw a number at the wall, like 350 grand US for this, all the bells and whistles. And what got them excited was they said they could tell in 5 calls who was going to buy or not. And so the cost of sale, you can imagine, for these yachts is big, right? The way people flying them in. I said, I can take, you guys are getting 300 views. We knew Google really well back then. You're getting 300 visits a month. I'm going to get that to 3,000 a month. I was just guessing. And then we're going to use this question and answer to help you validate if someone can afford to buy a yacht, and you fly them in, all this stuff. Long story short, they took the $300,000 one. We were like, we don't even know how to build that. So we flew back to Canada. Now we had to build a website that was going to get 10x visitors. We did that. But one of the deals he offered me, the CEO at the time, said, why don't we not pay you 300 grand? Why don't we pay you 1 or 2% on every website we sell through the website, or the lead? Obviously, you're not going to buy a $100 million yacht, but every lead, qualified lead, that leads to a sale. I said no to that because I couldn't even imagine what 300 grand was like. But anyways, we launched the site at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. And again, back to people not believing stuff. And the internet proves them wrong every time. They got over, I think they had 30,000 views on the website that month. So we blew it out of the water. And then they got 3 leads. And one of the leads was the Prince of Kuwait. And he bought 2 yachts. It was like $400 million or something like that from the lead. And then Scottie Pippen was another lead through the website that they sold an old one to. But the numbers were huge. And I did the math, and we could have got a better deal that way. But I tell that story to say the non-believers, I'm usually involved in these areas where non-believers of things are usually a good sign that it's going to happen. And most people don't think that they'll hire their team and have like 60, maybe even 70% of your staff contingent, but that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So
sorry, that was a long rant, but
no, I liked it. you mentioned Scottie Pippen. I'm a big Porsche enthusiast, and I look at all the auctions and trying to find a steal. And his custom Porsche is up for sale now. And you talked about him buying a boat. He bought a $50,000 Porsche and invested about $200K in customizing it. So he certainly loved his customized stuff. Hey, everything that's going on with COVID, and we sort of touched on this very, very lightly. How do you think this changes the mindset of really like open talent and is this, you said we're going to go back to offices and things like that, or things like that. But, I'm curious. So let me change the question. We'll get back to this. You can just freeform, but you mentioned headcount was so important in the advertising agency. It was almost like a badge of honor. And when all these furloughs and layoffs happen, I'm a bit of a skeptic, a pessimist, if you will. I thought that a lot of these headcount was really just an excuse to, like, they used COVID as an excuse to clear out either dead weight or unnecessary ego hires. And it wasn't really related to clients bailing and campaigns being killed, because when it happened, it was so knee-jerk that nobody actually knew how long this was going to happen, and nobody knew what the clients were going to do in a month from now. So, it was almost like there's this horrible, a hacky meme going around that COVID really led digital transformation for a lot of companies and getting them online. You could almost say that COVID led the ad agency into an open talent movement, whether they knew it or not. So do you disagree with it, as you're saying, or you don't? You're wondering if it was real, like, or if it was an excuse to move to this. Well, I think COVID's real, and I think open talent's real. I do think though that a lot of executives use it as excuse from you talk about the holding companies. There's so many people that they have to keep happy and accountable to profits and various things, but it's also a sign of weakness if you lay off 25% of your workforce. So this was just a real convenient way to lay off 25% of your workforce.
Yeah, there's probably truth to that. I disagree. I think uh, it's sometimes you needed a convenient excuse. Some
Mhm.
leaders aren't brave enough. I think that's maybe what you're saying. They should have done it earlier. Uh,
Mhm.
but it doesn't hurt to have that. It's still not fair. They
Mhm.
should have just been upfront about it. I can see that. But I think COVID, no, for sure, ushered in a new age of digital transformation. It had to, because we're separated. We're not
Mhm.
together. So, for instance, like, I don't know if you follow it, but John Krasinski of The Office,
Mhm.
his company was Sunday Night Productions, and do you know the story about Communo's connection with that? Some
I
video.
was going to ask you. I read it, and I wanted to hear it from you.
So clearly, when he joined, I didn't know he was on the platform. We have thousands of people, but he wanted to start the show. He couldn't obviously get a whole bunch of people from Hollywood together and create this show. He had to do it ad hoc. And where does he find those people? And a friend of a friend told him about Communo. He joined. Bing, 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 bing. He puts up 6 jobs. They're all filled within 3 days. Next thing you know, 3 days later, the show's live. It gets 16 million views, the first one, and now it's got over 1 billion views on all platforms and became a sensation. Um, that was Communo's moment in the sun, but that happens every day. So for us, it was huge. It happens every day on the platform, just not at that scale with a famous actor.
Mhm.
So I'm thankful for the coverage, of course, but kind of disappointed that took that to happen, because we'd already been having that happen every day.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think COVID for sure ushered in just forcing people to rethink how they work and how they consume media, how we connect with each other. I'm personally thankful. We have an office in New York, Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary for Communo. And out before this all happened, I was on the road 187 days last year, and I have small kids. And I'm just so thankful to be able to be home this year and give that time back to my family. They deserve it. So I think I'm going to be second guessing meetings that I got to get on planes for, and saving those travel days up for family time. And there's obviously, back to, I call it office centricity. There's a time and place, but I think there's going to be the shift, just like there's going to be a shift to. It might be. It might even get it could get crazy, and this for posterity. I'll put it out there where it could be 80-20 in the future. That 20%. It's normal to have 20% of your staff full time, and the rest are free agents, if you will. Because I think,
Mhm.
especially with creatives, they've never meant to be caged in at work.
Mhm. So, I'm all for outsourced labor. I agree with you about creative probably work best in shorter spurts and then longer term, and always just sort of readjusting and reevaluating. One thing that I've encountered, in my pitch meetings and things like that, is that a lot of brands don't believe that loyalty can be owned by outsourced teams, or brand loyalty can be out
Right.
things. Where do you sort of do you agree, disagree?
But you can't build, like, basically a cohesive team.
No, it's just like you're going to hand over your brand to somebody who isn't living and breathing it every
Oh,
day.
no,
They're not part of the
I
internal
disagree. I
conversations and
disagree
stuff
with
like that.
I have stats around that too. That it actually proven that remote teams actually deliver better uh, results on brand and on brief than people in an office. And I'll come back to the comment section after and get the stats. But here's the reason why. I'll tell you why and make my case for it.
Mhm.
With distributed teams, you're actually forced to have conversations, and meaningful ones, to make sure you're clear on stuff. Where if you're just passing by in the office, Saul, and maybe you were here, not in my bedroom, but we were in the
Mhm.
office together, and I was like, "Hey, blah 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 about this project," and I think you heard, and I know you, and then we find out later you didn't, and things get lost in translation. I think we uh, mistake presence for communication. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And again, people might misquote me on this, but obviously there's nothing like the human to human connection in real life. But there's also nothing like human to human connection like this too. We've just never been forced into it before. And the numbers speak for themselves on us. Our revenue, not just GMV or liquidity in our marketplace. Our revenue is up over 100% this quarter. So people joining and paying for the platform, over 100% in one quarter. And then our GMV is up almost 100x. So that's liquidity in the market. So there's a massive appetite for it. And I still not even happy with our product. There's people with better products. But here's a real good quote for you is when it comes to building marketplaces and platforms, your product doesn't matter. And I know my product team that might be listening might cringe, but your liquidity is your product when you build a marketplace. And so having scale and people actually putting projects up and having talent join is more important than how great the UX is. Obviously I want great UX and design, but the liquidity is your product, and man, the liquidity has exploded for us. And I just want to make sure we serve it properly.
Mm-hmm. So I have, smarter questions that I'll follow up with, but I, in your interesting facts, it says you hate cotton. What's the deal with that?
Oh, because I grew up like I talked about the hospital story earlier on. That I just always remember cotton being associated with needles, and it just gives me and by the way, that thing, I didn't read it all there, but that's from an old website that when we launched Colt, I just said 5 facts. I wanted the team to put 5 facts, and I made stuff up. And most of it's not true. It was just an example, and they kept them all. And now they're
See, you don't love Inspector Gadget?
I do love Inspector Gadget. I do hate whiners. I do love collecting whole hockey cards, but I don't speak fluent Cantonese. So the secret's out.
I'm glad I didn't spend my afternoon learning a phrase or two
and a couple others, but that's about it.
Where do you see the relationship between brands and freelancers going in the next year or two?
Yeah, I do see a day when the internet has been notorious for eliminating the middleman. We know. We used to all say, we'll never not go to Blockbuster and walk around and grab popcorn and look at, covers of DVDs. And along came Netflix and disrupted that. And, we'll never not have a real estate agent show us a house and pick our house for us. Well, we've seen that change. Well, agents, we're called agencies. I think there will be a day when there will be no agencies. I think self-forming tribes on platforms like Communo will be the future. I think there'll always be a general contractor. You talked about Hollywood, the directors or people, they'll be the main go-to people that collect people and can build teams well. But freelancers are going to be in control more than the brands, more than the agencies. I truly believe that. And here's what I mean by that. Brands are going to have to start to market and treat people really well to get the best talent, because talent will have more options than ever. The best talent will rise to the top and have an enormous amount of choice to go and sell their wares or their intellectual property to anyone. And so not only a brand is always how you behave and what you do, right? That's what a brand is. You deliver. So Cult brands, which I have a PhD in now, it feels like, is their first customers are their staff. The greatest brands in the world, people that tattoo their name on, are companies that if you go talk to the people that work at that company, they've worked there for 20 years, 30 years. They take care of their employees. Now, in this new age of contingent workers being the norm, how shitty people treat their contractors or freelancers, pay them poorly, don't pay them on time. All that stuff's going to get sorted out because they're going to not have talent. And the talent is going to go work for the brands that treat them the best and market to them the best. And the best way to market is to treat people right. So I hope Communo ushers in this era of transparency for the brands as well as the freelancers, and the agencies for now will play in the middle. I think, and again, agencies could be around for the next 50 years. I could be wrong,
Mhm.
but I think we can both see a day where why do you need an agent to source these people?
So, to sort of reading between the lines, this is going to be a boom period for freelancers as far as much more prosperous financially, maybe a little bit more control over picking the projects they want to work on. What happens to people who aren't very good at what they do?
Yeah, well, I believe in capitalism, and
Mhm.
I believe it's the best model. It's worked. There's other ones that are trying to work, but
Mhm.
you better be the best, and you shouldn't be a
Mhm.
generalist. I think that's a big thing for people that are listening. You can be the best at something. I clearly was not the best at school, right?
Mhm.
I failed at it, and so I didn't become a scholar
Mhm.
or a career student. I became an entrepreneur, and I found my way. Uh, I think on this note, I guess it's a dovetail, and I'd like your take on this, Saul. But I think people think with platforms even like ours, and some of our members are listening. You should listen up. You don't just join a platform and get work. To make a platform or marketplace work for you, you have to work your ass off. Your profile has to be the best. You got to give first. Um, there's no magic wand in life, and so the winner's going to go on our platform and others like ours to the people that work the hardest. It's just there's no magic formula. Now, COVID and work from home. I'm not a big hustle culture person. I think you should work, but you can do your own thing. If you only want to work 20 hours and that's your lifestyle, great. But even to get those 20 hours and to be in charge and be in demand, you better be good and you better deliver on what you say. And so that's my take on that. I think that it's not very genius, but it's just you're gonna have to work hard, and if you work hard, you'll win in some way. And so, but they'll just like everything. I believe in capitalism. It's there'll be winners and losers. And
All right, I got three more questions, then I give you your day back.
yeah,
Um, so I love the idea of cults and things, and like obviously not like
not
sex
not
cults
whole
and
cults. Cults, yeah.
yeah,
Cult is a good thing. We're all part of
yeah.
cults. I think people mix the words
Mhm.
up. Cults are not good.
Yeah. I have my own cult. If so my last name is Colt. I own saulcolt.com, CULT, and
Okay.
I invited people to sign up for a newsletter. It's not even a newsletter. You give me your home address, and twice a year I just mail you stickers and things with my face on it. Because
Show up. Twice a year I show up.
yeah, because I want to be adored. But one of the things I've learned about building my own brand is that like people either adore me or hate me, and I find that really interesting, and I appreciate that because I don't think I don't ever want to be in the middle of or I don't ever want to be vanilla or just just sort of consumed in that way anyways. But you know I think you have to be loved or hated, whether it be a personal brand or a professional brand. Otherwise, you just sort of get forgotten and you blend into the thing. But in your experience working with building cult brands or keeping brands as a cult, where where do you fall on the love hate thing, or is it okay to
Oh
sort
yeah.
of be
So
in the middle?
one of the things that the principles of cult brands is you have to pick an enemy.
Mhm.
They have villains and they have people out there they stand against. One of the greatest brands we got to work with and got to get a peek inside of is Las Vegas. So it's probably one of the first cities in the world that really became a cult-like brand.
Mhm.
And if you followed their rise, there was a day the CMO, it's a girl named Kathy Tull, that said, "What are we going to be? Are we going to be for kids, businesses, or sex, drugs, and rock and roll?" And they made a stand that they were for what happens here stays here. It's a famous line, but it's an operating model that is what you get when you come here. There is other stuff. There's businesses, convention stuff, but everyone's really clear on what happens in Vegas, right?
Mhm.
And when they leaned into that, literally it was a hockey stick.
Mhm.
And it was also another hockey stick they talk about of people that never came and will never come back. So whether you agree or disagree with Vegas and what it stands for, it worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that they just leaned into something that they believed in, and it can change over time. But that's a great example of not trying to be all things to all people. And for Communo, we're that way. Number one, it's costs money to be on our platform. We're one of the only platforms in communities like this that are operating models everyone contributes, and both sides. Everyone always asks, so what side pays for the service? And I say both sides. Everyone on the platform pays, because when I launched this business, there's a guy named Nazim Talib that wrote a book, Skin in the Game, an amazing book for those that want a great book to read. And in the book, one of the premises, if you don't have any money or some sort of skin in the game, you don't care. And so therefore you get this bad cycle of shitty work, bad people. No one has really any care for it. And so we made a big move early on that it costs money for everyone. It costs money because free isn't real. Like on Upwork or Fiverr, it's not free. It's very expensive if you look at what they take off it. So we're just upfront about it. And I saw other great businesses like Amazon's one with Prime, or Costco with their membership card. It seemed to have worked out pretty good for them. And that allows us to keep other things cheaper by having membership and subscription based. And so I forget what the question is now, but that's my answer.
All right, no problem. So I'm gonna forego one of my last two questions, because we have a question here from a viewer. Drew Malcolm asks, what kind of specialties or skills are lacking most within the community currently?
Yeah, probably more technical roles. Devs, back-end devs. And so we've solved that by creating a partnership with Top Coder. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them. Top Coder's been around, I think, for 18 years, if I'm not mistaken. So we do have developers, and that's sort of the science side of our platform. There is people there that like that, but we did rather than trying to create and build that community ourselves, we went out and partnered with them. I think another specialty that's lacking is just project managers. Great project managers that there make the world go round. And it's typically people think you should always have that in-house, but there's some great project managers out there that are freelancers. And so if you're listening, please join. There's lots of projects for you.
All right. So last question.
Yep.
You're super driven, and you've sort of dropped little breadcrumbs for our conversation about, sort of the things you've done. And, I imagine you sort of work in different gears and things like that. I'm always curious to hear the answer to this, but do you think you could teach drive to people, or do they either have it or don't have it?
I think you can teach clarity about what do you want in life. If you just want a lifestyle business or a lifestyle of 9 to 5, I think that's unbelievably awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But those that have big ambition for their life and they want something great, you can teach drive, and it starts with discipline. It starts with adding more hours to your day and finding hours. For me, it's the last year and a bit I've started waking up at 5 a.m. because I found myself saying I don't have enough time. Well, typically I was waking up at 8:30 or 9. I did the math in the last year. If I'd have done that for my whole career, 5 a.m., I would have added 13 years to my career. That's insane. So I think you can teach drive if you're clear on your goals. If people aren't clear on their goals and their purpose for those goals of why they want to do those, it's difficult. And for sure, I think there's people that are just driven. You can see it from when they're a kid to later in life. But I think drive can be learned. Same with leadership. Leadership isn't. There's some born leaders, but most leaders are built. And I'm one of those people. I wasn't natural. I learned it.
Cool. I really enjoyed this. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being so generous with it. Tell people how to find you. How do they?
I have a question for you first before you let me
Okay.
go.
I'll answer anything.
So you worked at, is it FreshBooks, or it was an accounting?
Yeah, no, well, I've worked at FreshBooks. I was the first marketing hire at FreshBooks in 2007, and
What
I've
was that?
also worked
What was that?
at, at
What was that ride like? What's the best thing that those companies that went big that you worked at? What did they do that you found?
I'm forever indebted to FreshBooks. I wouldn't have the career I have now if I hadn't done that. I would say the greatest thing that FreshBooks ever did for me was leave me alone. When I joined the company, it was very, very early days. They hadn't quite figured out everything. I don't think it, you
How
know,
early? Like what? How many people?
I, I was employee number 9,
Wow.
so first 10, and it's one of those things where I've worked for giant companies and worked for small companies. It took me a while to realize that nobody has it really all figured out, but like it was really very fly by the seat of our pants in those early days. Our first marketing plan was developed with by myself and a gentleman named Sunir Shah, where we called it marketing risk, and we took a real world map and we blocked out all the verticals, on the map, clustered the way you would play the game of risk. So in the game of risk, you focus on Australia, move up through New Zealand, and try to like conquer the world. Where we took all of our verticals, like web developers, web designers, marketing consultants, all these things, and all the ones that made sense, we kept them close. And once we felt that we had sort of owned one vertical, we made a small jump to the next vertical and small jump to the next vertical. But we never defended two sides of the world at the same time and focused our things. So you walk into an established company and say, hey, this is our marketing plan, and we bought a map from Staples or whatever, not a lot of people are going to be that impressed, but it worked because there was nothing in place. And the other really interesting thing was is the very early days of social media. So 2007, I think Twitter sort of launched 2008. We were able to really ride that early wave of social media. We were in Twitter's pitch deck, in their investment deck. The 5 or 6 brands that they thought who were doing social the best in those early days were FreshBooks, JetBlue, all the Zappos, all the usual suspects with Tony Hsieh and stuff like that. So if anything, it was really about taking giant risks, recognizing the opportunity in front of us, never taking your foot off the gas. And the biggest thing we did was we not only identified our community and our cult, we spent enormous amount of time. I'd say a third of our marketing budget went to airplanes and dinners and all those sorts of things, because now I kind of roll my eyes when I see all these what do they call them? I'm blanking on it. Mastermind groups and all these guys. It's like I invented the dinner. It's like dinners have been going on for 20 years already, and before that it was golf games or whatever. But to think anyone created taking 18 of your customers out for dinner and doing it is ridiculous. But so we didn't invent it, but I'd say we figured out how to do it really early, because whenever we were in town for a conference or those early bar camp days and all those things like that, we emailed every single one of our customers and users in that city and invited them out for dinner.
Yep.
And as the company grew, we were inviting 10,000 people to a dinner. We only had, a table for 10 or whatever. And we were very honest with people and said, you got to act right away and stuff like that. But we also created the demand of the next time you got that email, you better react quickly if you want to get into the dinner. And, we would pepper social media with all the pictures of the dinner and stuff like that. But the reason we emailed 10,000 people instead of 100 people is we wanted everybody to see that we were doing stuff. Like one of the key tenets of our marketing plan was to, and this goes back to the cult stuff, is like a huge metric for me was how many times could we actually hear anecdotally a story of someone turning to a friend and saying, you'll never imagine what just happened. A company that I'm on a freemium model for just invited me for dinner, or this company that I maybe paid $20 a month for invited me to a baseball game or something. So we really figured out amazing ways to leverage relationships and partnerships to barter for things. Like we got, we did a deal with the Blue Jays where we had a whole section in the 500 level where it was just dead inventory for them. It wasn't like anyone was sitting there. So we took 300 people to the baseball game. So it was always about spending time. And one of the things that we never formalized this, but it was really about more like making the service a club and even a secret club than anything else. And like I really connect to your whole tattoo thing, because while there might be a FreshBooks tattoo out in the world, I don't know, but we used to have a standing thing in our newsletter that said if anybody ever wanted to get a tattoo, we'd pay for it, because that was kind of like the two things that we really wanted to do. Was we wanted a wedding to come out from our dinners, and we wanted someone to get a tattoo, because we just thought if you're you could measure things based on revenue and acquisition and all those things. And we did, it was very seriously metrics driven company, but it's also good to have soft metrics. And our two big soft metrics were wanted a wedding and we wanted a tattoo. And, for all I know, there's several of both, but I can't swear to either one.
That's awesome. And I'll ask you one more question, because I've wanted to meet you. One of my business coaches right now is a guy named Mark McLeod. I don't know if you know him or heard of him. He was at Real Ventures, but then he was at FreshBooks as well.
Yeah, he was the CFO.
When you were there, was he the CFO?
We did not overlap, but I know Mark like from other areas.
What a great guy. Super smart. That's not this is just a side note, but you were also you did some influencer marketing before it was called that. Sorry, I'm looking inside. It's pouring rain here in Calgary. What influencer marketing worked best for you, or how did you see success with that early before it was called that?
So one of the things, and I think that people have sort of caught up to it, but in the early days, it was really it's always been about identifying your super fans and getting people to talk for you. And the early lessons was no one will ever talk for you if you don't give them something to talk about. So we invested tons of budget. You talk about some of your brands investing in keeping your cult-like status. We invested tons of our budget in experiences over digital advertising and things like that. We did all that digital stuff too, but it was probably a 60-40 split between experiences and things, because if you don't give anybody something to talk about, they're not going to talk about you. And if you don't give them the tools to talk about you, they're not going to talk about you. Like you could literally put somebody, courtside at a Lakers game, and if you don't kind of nudge them to tell all their friends, they're just going to go home and go, wow, that was the coolest thing ever. So it's always about earning the conversation and reminding them about that they should talk about the conversation. If they don't want to, there's no pressure, and it's not that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it for the right reasons. But again, early days of Twitter and early days of social media, people were way more chatty than they are now, and the quality of the conversation was far better. Like you can say whatever you want about social media, the way it's evolved or devolved, but you could actually have really meaningful exchanges, like those first 5, 6, 7 years of Twitter. Like you could actually meet people and create relationships. I have dear friends that I met through those early days that I've maybe met in person 3 times, but like these people I probably would call if I needed to be bailed out of jail or something like that, because it was just a very different time when people weren't that it wasn't such a negative place, and things like that. So getting people to talk was a lot easier, and getting that message to spread was a lot easier because it wasn't as noisy. And, you talk about tribes, you mentioned tribes earlier. There really were established tribes where, it's like everybody wanted to help each other out, and everybody wanted to be the person who, was part of the conversation, a part of the news. So, to seed things, it didn't cost any money. All it really took was maybe 3 hours of direct messaging people and setting it up, and you could get some.
Exactly, but I think people that's work. Like that.
Oh,
But it's awesome. Like I think hopefully people that are 16 people or whatever I'm looking at are listening. Like,
hmm.
if they're at my company, it takes 3 or 4 hours of direct messaging people and giving one, and you're going to reach 200 people. Only 20 are going to show up, but deliver for them, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's all work. And, like that's one of the things, like my whole career has been about, doing it the hard way. And, like I'm kind of like, I'm almost anti-automation. I've warmed up to it later in life and things like that, but I would
Yeah.
really rather,
Sure. But in the early days, when I say early, 5 years, there's this post someone made the other day about sharpening an axe. If you wanted to cut down a tree, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening an axe and 2 hours cutting it down. And I'm like, that obviously that sounds smart, but you don't have 6 hours in a startup. Yeah, like to live, and
yeah.
you better start working, not trying to be smart. I don't know. I want to talk more with you for sure, but I know I have to wrap up here. So
No, well, tell people how to join Communo, find more information.
So you can go, for those watching, go to Communo.com. You can sign up. During COVID, we've actually have made it free to help out and show some love properly. And then for those people that work at a company or a brand, come tomorrow, we'll be opening up beta to 150 brands to help us build what the brand profiles and the brand side of our business looks like. And no, I really appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. See you, everyone.